Welcome to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Suzy Vidori, where I peel back the layers of how to wow your readers with your fiction, your nonfiction. Anybody can bang out a first draft, but it takes a little more work to make your book as amazing as it can be. Join me as I share the step-by-step writing techniques you could apply to your writing right away, as I host successful writers who share a behind-the-scenes look at their own writing lives, and as I live coach writers on their pages, giving practical writing examples that will make your own writing stronger. Nobody is born knowing how to write an engaging book. There are real and important skills that you need to learn. On this show, I cut through the noise and get you all the info you need. I can't wait to see how this information is going to transform your writing. Fasten your seatbelts, listeners, because today we have Ian Page coming on the podcast to talk about writing with humor. I first met Ian several years ago when I developmentally edited his debut novel, which has just come out, The Naked Ambition. It was really fun to work with Ian because he has so many opinions and so much to say, and to work on the tone of his humor, to work on the sarcasm, to work on the political bent that he wanted to convey. We're going to talk about all of that today on the podcast, so listen up. If you've ever considered writing with humor, wondering how to do it, wondering if you're doing it well, wondering why you'd want to do it, we're going to answer all of that today. Ian Page draws on decades of professional geophysics in the oil patch for his debut novel, The Naked Ambition. Ian gained his BSc in geophysics from the University of Alberta, never to set foot in the halls of academia again. At various times, he's been a wretched musician, an unreliable soldier, and a failed treasure hunter. Ian is a native of Halifax, Nova Scotia, and currently resides in the Okanagan Valley of British Columbia with his wife, where he spends ridiculous amounts of time playing hockey, golfing, walking, and goofing off, much to the annoyance of his publisher. As you can tell from the bio that he submitted, Ian is absolutely hilarious, and I can't wait for you to hear this episode.
And the other one has eventually gets to a ticking clock because of there's an opening night to the...
Oh, there's an opening night. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's amazing.
But in the version that you edited and I think this is important for writers, you had pointed out an opportunity in the structure of the novel that I have.
I have no idea where you're going, but I'm excited to hear what resonated.
So we had a very strong subplot for one of Chester's friends, Craven Moorhead, who's
right.
He's the wingman. He's the crass guy. He'll say anything, and maybe that could be another favorite character because I can put any.
Just the things you can put in his mouth are awesome. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So he's a lot of fun, and most of my beta readers would point that out. They would say, when I needed a laugh, that's the guy who's going to give me the laugh.
You always want him around.
There is something...
You actually need him to balance... Sorry, I'll let you finish, but you actually needed him to balance Chesterfield because you meant for Chesterfield to be so bland, at least in the beginning. So you need that sidekick that's going to... right.
The first novel is in third person. The next two are in first person. So you see everything through Chester's eyes. And it turns out he's sharply observant, even if we'll call him book smart, street stupid as shorthand. So he gets himself into situations where his expertise is maybe organizing things and trying to checklist things off, but he doesn't understand the process. He doesn't understand the atmosphere, the culture that he's dumped himself into. So the theater is something he has no idea about, and he gets pushed around pretty hard. But during that towards the end, when the climax is approaching, you had pointed out that there was an opportunity to move a particular chapter back, and it all of a sudden it threaded two major plots together. So the collision was better. It was a better accident, if you like, than what was previously put together.
Yeah, and so we have to. I mean, the way that we look at that as the way that I look at things as a developmental editor, when we write things, we think about them in chronological order or how they come to us, or there's a number of ways that writers do it. But I'm always looking through a reader's lens and when do we need that information? And as we said, I'm just going to summarize a few things because you said so many good things about writing humor here. You've got to plan the setup and the thread to educate the reader all the way along so that we're waiting for the punchline. And then the timing is really important to that because you don't want to stop the action, right? You don't want to give them that slap and then have it stop. So the timing of where you're putting it is important. It's also important to get beta readers involved to see, are these jokes landing, right? Like no comedian, well, most comedians don't go up on stage cold with something that they wrote for the very first time. They try out their material on their friends or their family or somebody first. And there's lots of, I mean, especially with humor, that feedback loop is really important. So yeah, that was absolutely something that then we would be tracking it. And you didn't have to change very much. That's one of my tenets of editing, is not to tell people to go and rewrite everything, but to say, hey, if you were just to move this one thing, you might have to, weave it a little bit better or add some transition there, but it's going to bang for your reader is going to be so much more impactful, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm not very good with flipping narratives back and forth on timelines. And you would point out a reference I had made where Chester actually addresses, he breaks the fourth wall with the reader a bit.
Yeah.
And says, like, I hate doing this, but I got to go back to August, when in fact it was already October. So I tended to write linear novels. They're easier for people to track naturally, but going back and forth, flashbacking and going back and forth, I'm troubled by that internally in my own head.
But it doesn't always serve the story. A lot of times writers will come to me with a very complex structure that they would like to, because they just read Gone Girl or something where they're, where it's really tricky. The thing is, unless it serves the story or there's a reason to do it, it's so much more difficult as a writer and the payoff isn't there. If you're writing a thriller, psychological thriller like Gone Girl, the actual structure is part of the novel. It's important because you have to hide stuff, so the payoff is there. But for a regular book, doing it is adding complexity. It's difficult to do well, especially your first book. If you come to me for your 7th novel and you want to try it because your brain needs the challenge, that'll be different because you'll be able to hold a lot more things in your head and you'll understand a lot more about story structure, right?
Yeah. And to serve humor, there's immediate jokes. And then there's longer term jokes, the payoff of, a longer arc. So usually it's enter, conflict, exit, right? And so the setup, the necessary background that has to get inserted. But then there's the punchline. And to keep humor fresh and rereadable or rewatchable, if you want to talk about the visual arts, there has to be some reasonable linearity for people to understand and appreciate. I'm not going to blow somebody away with, Steinbeckian technique or something like that. That's not the point of my novels. I want to write something that's going to have some degree of legacy for my family. I want them to enjoy my voice as some sort of distant echo long after I'm gone. And, I'm dedicating the second book to my granddaughter. She loves to laugh. That kid loves to laugh. So, as she gets older and starts to, evolve her reading list into adult fare, she'll pick this up.
And she'll hear your humor. I love that.
She'll hear great.
Okay, so Ian, here's a question for you. Would you consider yourself funny in real life?
My wife says no.
Right?
Because again, that's a double joke, right? Just an easy, simple response. I lay it out on somebody else so that there's a bit of misdirection. It's my wife's fault that I'm not funny, or she doesn't think I'm funny. You can interpret it a couple of different ways, but I've always enjoyed the pithy remark when I'm in the dressing room with the guys in hockey. I'm still playing. They get my humor. I do Far Side mock-ups when I put out the rosters for ice times. So I've learned to be quick and quippy with certain things. I can't tell a long joke. So, if you ask me, the 3 men walk into a bar kind of joke or something, I can't tell those. I can't do that. But if you're talking about something maybe in the British tradition or the absurdity tradition of, Monty Python, something like that, I get that humor and I can provide some sort of imitation of that.
Yeah. And I think I just point it out because you probably could tell a guy walked into a bar joke in writing because you have that skill, right? Like you could probably do that if you wanted to.
Yes, if you can give me enough time to think
Yeah,
of setup, think about the
that's what I'm
content.
saying. You do more of that style, not the guy walks into a bar, but the kind of setup and all the things is what you have to do in writing. And
Yeah,
yet you're saying that's not what you would quip in the dressing room. And so for those listeners, if you're thinking about writing humor, it doesn't necessarily have to be because you're funny in real life. In fact, I ran into somebody that I went to university with when I first started writing and my first novel came out, and I shared with him that my novel came out, and he's like, "Oh, I can't wait to see your biting humor on the page." And I was like, "My book isn't funny." He's like, "Why not? You're funny." And I was like, "Okay, I mean, I do have a wit and humor." And we were talking about, within your own cohort, whatever you see that as. I think you used the example of your ladies who lunch or your golfing buddies or whatever it is. But swearing is the same within those cohorts. Like you can kind of push the limits within whatever that is. Students, like kids, might push the limits with kids, but they wouldn't say that to their parents, or vice versa. The parents might also say it to another parent, but not to the kids, right? There's these crossing of boundaries. But however your humor expresses itself in real life, you can try different things on the page. They don't necessarily need to match.
yeah. I mean, a first draft, a fifth draft, and a final draft are all experiments. And if I was to apply the scientific method of, hypothesis, gather data, analyze and conclude, and then revise the hypothesis, that's in effect what a writer does. In fact, it's funny you mentioned profanity because there is a certain amount of it in the first book, and it carried over into the next two, but it started to disappear. And I'm looking at it slightly differently now. And
Do you see why? Because I can maybe guess why.
I think
I didn't notice.
it's probably fatigue as one thing, because the theater of the absurd often is mocking. Profanity is the invective of anger and so on. And there are moments of anger that show up. So now I'm attempting to use it more as a buttoning of a certain, well, it could be a joke. It could be, it's usually just a situation that a character finds themselves in. And then there's the dialogue of trying to pull somebody back from a brink.
Yeah. And I think as well, just looking at it, and I have to go back through them to see if this holds true, but I'll just ask you because in book one, Chesterfield and his friends are quite separate from the older characters in your book. And in the next books, they are forced to work with them, and they probably would use less profanity because they are not within their cohort as often. They're in that larger group. Just a thought.
Yeah, in the case of the older generation that you're speaking of, those are mostly board members. At Sanders Oil, which is the company that Chester works at.
And then the theater, and then
those are military men,
yeah.
and if you've ever spent any time with military men, profanity leaks through a lot of their conversation anyway. It certainly does, amongst themselves when certain topics are brought up. But most of the time, they're dealing with other traumas and so on. As I kind of float through my head, does the Sergeant Major actually swear a lot? No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Currently. Craven does more often.
He didn't need it. His words are so biting. He might not very, he says what he thinks.
Certainly the Sergeant Major is not going to hold back on you, but his delivery is clipped. The words are like a machine gun. It's a staccato. So he does not tend to suffer fools gladly, but at the same time, he's not reading them out with I can think of the character from Full Metal Jacket, the Lee Emery's performance there. He basically did 20 minutes to 2 hours in front of Kubrick, just going through the drill sergeant's manual of every kind of insult you could possibly imagine. And some of them are pretty darn harsh. I've heard softer versions of it from my own military life.
But again, that doesn't always translate onto the page.
That's correct. That's the problem. So the immediacy of certain dialogue works in real life, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the page. We talk differently. Just you and I conversing here on a podcast talk differently than the characters talk on a page.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. That's a whole other podcast episode, right? I get to talk about dialogue all day long. Okay. your book is set in the 90s.
Yep.
And now that is considered historical. I was actually at a conference last week where, agents were talking about that. And I know it's insulting. I had been working with a woman there whose book was set in the 80s. So depending on where you go, it's 30 to 50 years, right?
Yep.
That the sort of historical title goes. So we're kind of getting into that. So there's other things that you did which were cool for world building and to help people who didn't maybe live in the corporate world in the 90s sort of understand what it was like. But in terms of humor evolves as well, right? And now that is 30 plus years ago. And what's acceptable for humor, our humor evolves some of the fastest of any evolution of language in terms of how quickly it changes and what's acceptable through the years. How did you decide to address this in the book? Because I know that this is something that we discussed.
That wasn't easy, but keep in mind that I'm part of what's, I guess, some people now call Generation Jones. I was born in 62. So I came of age professionally in the 80s and 90s. So it wasn't difficult for me to bring back
to remember what was said in the day.
Yeah, and what was acceptable then is certainly not acceptable now. I think there's been a narrowing of discourse, at least in a lot of the corporate offices. So, but it's interesting how we talk about what's allowed. I think I just made a reference in one of my edits about how women, because women, the number of women, the percentage of women had climbed so quickly through the late 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Hey, I was starting my career in the 90s, and I joined a firm who had just allowed women to wear pants.
Yeah, that is
like, I mean, it's a time, right? Like it's a time when it was, and I lived through that.
Yeah, and that's chapter one of The Naked Ambition, because one of the main characters, Isabella Towers, is wearing a pantsuit, and her older recruiter, the brash Andrea, says, well, you can't wear that. The people you're going to be speaking to, they're World War II combat vets.
No, I was only allowed to wear pants if it was a black or navy suit. Dress code for sure. Like not even other colors at the time.
Yes. Yeah. So styles change, and Chester is very fussy about that. So there's some rich commentary about that through a lot of the books. But the second thing I would suggest is that how we spoke in the office, how we addressed issues
of marginalized populations, right? Marginalized populations changes throughout.
Yeah, when I was building my roster of characters, most of the people I was working with through the 90s and onward, it was quite a diverse crowd, but it's just naturally so. It wasn't forced. In other words, we never had a policy of affirmative action or anything like that in the oil patch. One of the curious things, I'll tell you a quick story about a geologist I worked with. His name was Peter Albrecht. Really interesting guy, and he grew up in the same province I did, Nova Scotia. But he was in the northern Nova Scotia, where he couldn't get summer jobs because of his last name. He was Hungarian by background. And he got shut out of summer jobs because he wasn't named, Gillis, Douglas, or McDonald, or whatever.
Conway,
stuff.
Also from Nova Scotia.
Well,
we've ever talked about that.
No, we haven't. And so the strange thing. So the strange thing is, you're now in Alberta. He made the same trip I did. We didn't know each other at the time, but his first experience coming to Alberta, he walked onto a construction site, uninvited, and asked the supervisor there, "Have you got work for a laborer?" And he had no skills. And the guy looked at him and said, "You want to work hard?" And Pete said, "Yeah, you're hired." Yeah. And that was that. And so I think in the oil patch had a lot of the same attitude. A lot of people I ran into, they're from diverse backgrounds of any and all sorts. Name the diversity, and it's there. Nobody cares. They only cared about one thing. Are you interested in doing something?
But it's hard because when we're trying to represent things, we want to show how far we've come. There's ways, but your readers have a different lens, and we don't want to inadvertently reinforce negative stereotypes from the past. And I think, that was something that we worked on and you've done a good job of in the end. You could still have the jokes and have the tension without giving voice to some of the hate speech that might have actually.
The version that you see now has been toned down for just personal mockery that people, what the characters would normally do. And, because they're friends. And Craven ends up being the best man at Dar's wedding. So they're great pals. But do you think they're going to stop mocking one another? That's not how guys work.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. We're to the quick fire portion of this podcast. So are you ready? Okay. How long did it take you from the first time that you thought up Chesterfield to publishing The Naked Ambition?
15 years.
15 years. Yeah. And we hear that a lot. Okay. What was your first big break where you realized you were actually going to do something with this novel and it was going to happen?
I had a conversation with a fellow named Ron Barnby, a friend of my wife's. We were just sitting around the cottage kind of thing one day at his place, and he told me about self-publishing. And I had spent a year querying traditional publishing, and humor is probably the closest thing in the publishing world to typhus. It's
hard, and you kind of cross genres, and it's not easy to find a home for it. That's for sure.
The tagline I would use now is, and what I should have used then was Woodhouse meets Succession. So everyone has watched Succession. They love the family dynamics, and the old man kind of kicks off, and just disaster ensues. And then I've always liked wordplay. I've always liked the humor world. So Woodhouse is a favorite. I've got a stack of his books. That was an easy shorthand.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the best advice that you have, Ian, looking back from the other side of having published your book for those who want to write humor?
Oh, keep doing it. They're look for any opportunity for some sort of outlet. I'm on X as Bertie Wooster Sauce.
Go find him.
Yeah, go find him. There's a few witticisms there, but it's an excellent training ground, especially if you are not verified. You've got 280 characters. You get your humor out. And
try it. Try out your material.
Yeah.
See what you get.
Sharpen the stone. Oh, and by the way, just as a personal note, one of the things that you had mentioned about setting, it just popped in my head. I've now named the town.
What's the town?
Whetstone.
I love it.
Yeah, 2 T's, but instead of just one for wet. But
because there was always the debate. Where is this? Is it Calgary? Is it somewhere else? Is it
the only two possibilities really were Calgary or Denver, and being the guy who can't make a decision sometimes, I left it open. And I want people to read it in their own minds as one.
But the town is so important. You have mayor, and you have the council, and you have all these things that revolve around the town that never had a name.
Yeah, and the town's unique. Like, they don't have their elections in November. So they've got it in January. So there's all kinds of goofy stuff. So Whetstone as a made-up name made more sense. And metaphorically, the sharpening stone, the oiliness is sometimes involved. It's perfect.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, thank you so much, Ian. We will drop all the links of where to get The Naked Ambition and where to follow you and how to interact with Ian. Thank you so much for sharing this on the podcast. It was a blast.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Suzy Vidori. It is my absolute honor to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or the book that you're planning to write. Please help me keep the podcast going by helping people find us. You can subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening to show how much you enjoy the show. That's how other listeners will find us. Also, visit suzyvidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly inspired writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about all the upcoming training events and writing courses that happen in my community. Want my eyes on your writing? Submit a page of your current draft for a chance to come on the podcast at the link in the show notes. I'd love to chat with you about your writing in my always positive, incredibly supportive way so that you can make great strides towards your writing goals. I'm here to cheer you on. Remember, that book you're writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make that it the absolute best it can be. See you again right here next week. Hi, writer. Want my support to get your book finished and out into the world? Join my Inner Circle membership, a community of supportive writers where each month we set goals, share pages, learn new techniques, and get you unstuck fast so that you can make continuous progress on your writing goals. Coached Writers Finish. And you can get me as your virtual book coach in this group program for only $199 a month, much less than a single one-on-one coaching session. Check out the details at suzyvidori.com/inner circle. We have live events happening all the time, so grab your spot now to join us.